Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Wetzel, one of the publishers and editors at Saturnalia Books. Thank you all for joining us on this fall day or evening, wherever you are, to celebrate the launch of Late to the House of Words, the selected poems by Gemma Gorga, written by Gemma and translated from its original Catalan into English by Sharon Dolin. I love this book, and I am thrilled to have been a tiny part of its creation. Before we get to the poems, I do want to say a few words about why we do and should find the translation of female writers by female translators so important, particularly this one. According to various sources, only about 3% of the literary works published in the US are works translated from other languages into English. I'm sure this stat varies year to year, but I think we'll all agree the percentage remains small. According to an essay, in fact, I just read by Alison Anderson, called Where Are the Women in Translation, of that 3%, only a little more than a quarter are by women authors. And if we take all these numbers at face value, less than a single percent of the thousands of novels, works of poetry, drama published in the US are translations of female authors. Imagine how many fewer are translations of females by females. Imagine how many fewer are translations from Catalan, a language once suppressed by the Spanish government and which Gemma Gorga gives life and its sounds to us in the present. In any event, we can talk about the reasons, cultural, institutional, historical, for the low representation, but it is one reason why the efforts, not just by female translators such as Sharon, female authors such as Gemma, putting their work into the world are important, but also why this memorial prize, the Melinda A. Markham Translation Prize, which generally supports these female voices in poetry and in translation, is so very vital. I think Melinda, a poet and a translator of Japanese poetry herself, would agree, and I would urge you to seek out Melinda Markham's poetry, beautiful, haunting, which I also believe finds new meaning in the books published in her name. And this brings me to this specific book, these specific female voices. Both Gemma and Sharon, poets in their own languages, Catalan and English, found each other's work, and for a reason as simple as falling in love with someone else's words, Sharon, the author of 6 books of poetry and a prose memoir, began translating Gemma's poetry. Compressed, insightful, these poems most contained on a single page, its English translation from the Catalan reflected back at it, continually surprise. This book also spans some 25 years of Gemma's work, which includes 7 books of poetry. Some of the presses that originally published these books have disappeared. Some of the poems, no doubt, have evolved from their first printing. Thus, if a translation is not an exact replica of an original, neither in content nor in its sound, nor are even the originals, they are both, to use words by someone more brilliant than I, part of the poem's afterlife, the ongoingness of the words into the world. So with that brief and inadequate introduction, let me turn the program over to Sharon and Gemma, who will in turn read a few poems from Late to the House of Words. For those of you who haven't already purchased this wonderful book, I'll put a link in the chat where you can do so. You can also find it on the Saturnalia website, Amazon, and through your local bookstores. Thanks again, and now over to these poets.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I really am so happy to be here, and thank you all for coming. What we're going to do is have a bilingual reading, and Gemma is going to read the poem first in Catalan, so you hear the musicality and the sounds of that language, and then I will read my translation in English. So the first poem we're going to read, Digue-me rai, Mirror, Mirror on the Wall, is the poem that is the title poem of the collection. Gemma?
Hi, I just want to say hello to everybody, and I'm very happy to be here. I don't know where here is, but anyway, sharing these words and this reading with you all. So yes, the first poem, Digue'm, mirall. Vam fer tard a la casa de les paraules i ara baixem a les palpentes escales adolorides com vèrtebres i busquem entre el cal s'obre alguna síl·laba viva, germana del pa i la penúria, per dur-nos als llavis. Com ara un nom de dona, l'os d'un nom de dona, extraviat entre les pedres d'aquests murs que un dia foren habitats carn endins. I potser un joiell, una capseta, un mirall a qui poder preguntar tantes coses.
Mirror, mirror on the wall. We showed up late to the house of words. Now we grope our way down stairs as painful as vertebrae and search between the wall's plastered shards for some living syllable, sister to bread and poverty, to bring to our lips, such as a name, a woman's name, the bone of a woman's name lost between the stones of these walls that once upon a time housed flesh inside, and perhaps a jewel, a little box, a mirror you could ask, so many things. The next poem I'm going to read, or what you will hear Gemma and I read, is A las horas ella, so then she, and it's a kind of alternate creation story, the way I see it.
Let's see. The rhythm is especially important for me in this poem. I aleshores ella, amb farina i aigua treballava el seu cos, amb farina i saliva concebia, inclinava, aprenia que amb farina i dues mans s'arriba al dúctil secret de la matèria. Amb farina i llavis treballava l'home fins a l'elasticitat insuportable de la tendresa. I aleshores lentament tastava el seu cos, el pa que era el seu cos, el pa que s'emmotllava tan bé a les mans com la llum a la terra.
So then she, with flour and water, she worked his body. With flour and saliva, she conceived, leaned, learned that with flour and both hands, you reach the secret pliability of matter. With flour and lips, she worked the man down to the unbearable elasticity of tenderness. Then slowly she tasted his body, the bread that was his body, bread that fit as well in her hands as does light on earth. I love that poem. I love all of them though. So I wanted to show you the range of Gemma's work. Most of her poems are not strictly autobiographical the way we think of, but this one, I think it comes out of her life. And it's a beautiful early, I would say it's an early poem of hers, relatively speaking, 2003. So it's called Pedras, Stones.
Yes, you're right. There's here an autobiographical thing. Yeah, maybe I can explain later. Pedres. Si la veu pogués sortir a les fotografies com hi surt l'ombra o la tendresa, tot i ser realitats més vulnerables, sentiria un cop més el meu pare explicant-me que abans de collir una pedra cal fer-la rodolar amb el peu o amb una branca per espantar els escorpins que s'hi amaguen, com punxes seques. Mai no vaig preocupar-me'n, perquè tenir 6 anys era senzill, senzill com morir-se. En tots dos casos no hi havia més secret que l'aire, respirar-lo o no respirar-lo, com si l'ànima fos plena de diminuts alvèols que s'obren i es tanquen. El primer escorpí que vaig veure va ser el llibre de Ciències Naturals, atrapat per sempre entre les pinces severes del temps. De vegades, però, els llibres no expliquen tota la veritat, com si no la sabessin o l'haguessin oblidat camí de la impremta. Aràcnid que té el cos dividit en abdomen i cefalotòrax. Res no hi deia del sol ardent a la llengua, de la por, de l'espiga travessada al coll. Jo no sabia llavors que les paraules són immensos icebergs que oculten sota les aigües glaçades molt més del que mostren, com la paraula escorpí. I ara, mentre el telèfon sona insistentment, un crit agut de matinada, mentre em llevo, encenc el llum, acosto la mà al seu cos blanc de plàstic que brilla com una pedra al sol, mentre el despenjo i dic sí, i algú em diu que ets mort. Jo només penso en els escorpins, en allò que volies dir-me quan repeties fer rodar les pedres, sisplau, fer rodar les pedres.
Stones. If a voice could emerge from photographs the way a shadow or tenderness does, despite there being more vulnerable realities, I would hear once more my father explaining to me that before picking up a stone, I should roll it over with my foot or a branch to scare off any scorpions hiding underneath like dry thorns. But I didn't worry about it because being 6 years old was simple as dying. In either case, it's no more secretive than the air, to inhale or not to inhale, as if the soul were filled with tiny alveoli that open and close. The first scorpion I ever saw was inside a book about the natural sciences. Trapped forever between the severe pincers of time. Sometimes, though, books don't tell the whole truth, as if they didn't know or had forgotten on the way to the printer. Arachnid, whose body is divided into an abdomen and cephalothorax. No mention was made of the sun burning the tongue, of fear, of the thorn piercing the neck. I didn't know then that words are enormous icebergs hiding under glacial waters, much more than they show, like the word scorpion. Now, as the phone insistently rings, morning's harsh cry, as I awaken, turn on the light, bring my hand to its white plastic body that shines like a stone in the sun, as I pick it up and say, yes, and someone says you are dead, I just think about scorpions and what you wanted to tell me when you repeated, roll over the stones, please roll over the stones. The next
Wow,
poem,
thank you.
it's just a beautiful poem. They all are. I mean, we can talk more. We can talk more afterwards, or answer any questions. So the next one is one of my favorites. It seems to. It's a whole worldview in this poem, but that's sometimes what poems can do. It's called Semantics and Nutrition, and I was almost going to start in reading it. Gemma, you go ahead.
Semàntica i nutrició. Cau la fulla a terra i es descompon en significats menors. Humitat, pigment, làmina, oxigen, escalfor, llum. Com qui lletreja el seu nom sencer a un desconegut. Anhidrit carbònic. Res no es perd pel camí, ni les converses que ha mantingut amb la pluja de nit, ni les lliçons de vol que li han donat els ocells. Tota ella es descompon en unitats menors directament assimilables per la paciència de les formigues, les boques callades del bosc. És per això que l'idioma del vent arriba a parlar-se també sota terra. I és per això que els cucs s'emproven ales i surten volant convertits en papallones. Tot és matèria. Tot es transforma en vol quan una simple fulla cau a terra.
Semantics and Nutrition. The leaf falls to the ground and decomposes into smaller meanings. Moisture, pigment, lamina, oxygen, heat, light. The way someone spells out their full name to a stranger. Carbon dioxide. Nothing is lost along the way, neither its conversations with the night rain, nor flying lessons given by birds. It all decomposes into smaller units, directly assimilated by patient ants, the silent mouths of the forest. That's why the language of the wind also comes to be spoken underground. That's why worms try on wings and fly away, turned into butterflies. Everything is matter. Everything is transformed into flight when a simple leaf falls to the ground. I love that poem. In case you haven't noticed, Gemma is often playing around with language itself, focusing on the words, and she and I both are in love with the dictionary, and this one is especially in love with the dictionary. It's called Per Ordre Alphabetic, in alphabetical order, and I had to do some quite creative translating at the end of this poem, because obviously the words in one language are not in the same order as the words in another language. So.
Yes, I guess this gave you a lot of trouble.
Or fun. So how you
Okay. Per ordre alfabètic. Fullejo el diccionari a l'atzar. Qui ha plantat calèndules al costat dels calendaris, lliris als llindars de la pàgina? Es treuen les paraules, les sabates, per celebrar com cal el sàbat. La tristesa no és tan lluny de les trinxeres, ni la mort del marbre, ni les plomes del plom que les fa caure enllà del significat. Passo els dits pels lloms polsosos del record i busco un criteri que em permeti ordenar el desordre. Voldràs dir-me, sisplau, per quina lletra t'hauré de buscar a tu, tul, tulipa, túmul, turment?
In alphabetical order. I leaf through the dictionary at random. Who has planted calendula next to calendar? Lilies by the lintel of the page. Words shed their shoes as they should to celebrate the Sabbath. Trenchant is not that far away from trenches, nor is mortality from marble, nor leaves from lead, which makes them fall beyond their meaning. I pass my fingers over the dusty spines of memory and search for a rule that lets me order the disorder. Please tell me, under which letter do I need to look for you, yarrow, yaw, yawp, you? That final U is Y-E-W, which is a homophone that does not exist in the original, but Gemma was rhyming words beginning with the letter T, and there are a lot more words beginning with the letter T for to, you in Catalan than there are Y, you in English. So it was a challenge, but I had to get creative with that final line. Next one I think is just is wonderful poem, and it's appropriate for the season. It's called Pomegranate. Yes. Be the season of pomegranates right now.
M'agrana. Les grano amb els dits i salten tot de records sobre la llum gebrada del marbre. Petits, encesos com bombetes vermelles de fira, esprosos com la llengua felina del temps, que ens convida a seure a taula per engolir-nos d'una bocada. La magrana torna cada final de tardor, disposada a devastar-nos una nit qualsevol, mentre som a la cuina, distrets amb el sopar. Molt lleument batecant-nos els dits, amb aquell color pensatiu i tèrbol, el color que tenen les hores que no acaben de coagular, el color obert de la memòria.
Pomegranate. With my fingers, I pry out the seeds, and all my memories spill onto the frosty light of the marble counter. Little, lit up like ruby red carnival lights, rough as the cat tongue of time, inviting us to sit at the table in order to gobble us up in a mouthful. The pomegranate returns every late autumn, ready to ruin us on whichever night we are in the kitchen, distracted by dinner. Very lightly, it stains our fingers that pensive, murky color, the color ours take on that won't clot, the open color of memory.
I get a lot of inspiration in the kitchen. Semantics and nutrition and
Yes.
pomegranate. Yeah.
I think we're moving on. Is this from your,
It's closure?
It's from Moore. It's from your penultimate book. This is this is more recent. This is from 2015. So I love this. I love this entire book, but you'll get a sample of it. And this poem is called Closure. Clausura.
Clausura. Estic tancada en un bressol. No sé quants anys tinc. Estic tancada en aquest despatx. No sé quina hora és. Tancada en un somnífer, ja sense preguntes. Tancada en un nom propi. Qui m'invoca? Qui em convoca? Tancada en un planeta, invisible a la lent del telescopi. Tancada en un arbre genealògic. Les arrels podrides per un excés d'aigua als ulls. Tancada en les 45 espelmes del pastís. Tancada en un sac. L'oxigen sempre insuficient. Escàs com les respostes amb sentit. Tancada en una capsa de sabates. De tant en tant, una mà pietosa escampa 4 fulles de morera per fer-me feliç. Tancada en el meu propi tancament, en les pedres amb què aixeco l'ombra del mur, en la boca i la saliva que no dono, en aquesta veu que roda paladant dins, minvant sense presses, concentrada, concèntrica, constant, com un univers en regressió.
Closure. I am enclosed in a crib. Don't know how old I am. I am enclosed in this office. Don't know what time it is. Enclosed in a sleeping pill. No questions asked. Enclosed in a proper name. Who invokes me? Who summons me? Enclosed in a planet, invisible through the telescope lens. Enclosed in a genealogical tree. Its roots rotten from too much water in the eyes. Enclosed in the 45 candles on the cake. Enclosed in a sack, always without enough oxygen, as scarce as meaningful answers. Enclosed in a shoebox. From time to time, a pious hand scatters 4 mulberry leaves to make me happy. Enclosed in my own enclosure, in the stones I use to raise the wall's shadow, in this mouth and saliva I do not give, in this voice wheeling inside my palate, diminishing unhurriedly, concentrated, concentric, constant, like a universe in regression. There are a number of poems, I feel like there are a number of poems in here that are about language. There are a number that have memory in them, and there are a number of poems that have death in them. And so this one, death is central to this next poem, and where death is personified throughout. Lapat, if you'll read it for us.
Yes, l'àpat. La mort ens va buidant amb la cullereta plana dels minuts, mos a mos, sense excessiva voracitat. A voltes obre la nevera i ens contempla a la llum blavosa del calfred. com qui es lleva a mitjanit, a mig desig, sense saber ben bé què vol. Al carrer, algú abaixa amb gest inútil la persiana del restaurant. Asseguda entre taules i cadires buides, ella repassa la carta per enèsima vegada, torna a dir els nostres noms entre les dents, esfilagarsadament, com si escurés les molletes de carn ocultes entre els cartílags d'aquest ocell sense remissió que som. Cada matí fem l'equipatge i fugim amb les primeres orenetes, però la boca que se'ns empassa acaba sent més gran que la paràbola del vol.
The meal. Death is emptying us out with the flat teaspoon of minutes, bit by bit, without being excessively voracious. Sometimes it opens the fridge and contemplates us in the chilled, bluish light, like someone who gets up at midnight, half wanting something without really knowing what. In the street, someone is lowering the restaurant gate with a useless gesture. Seated between empty tables and chairs, death reviews the menu for the umpteenth time, repeats our names between its teeth, unraveling them as if scouring for morsels of meat hidden in the cartilage of this hopeless bird that we are. Every morning we pack our bags and take flight with the first swallows, but the mouth that devours us ends up being larger than the parabola of our flight. What I tried to preserve in this poem is that the lines get increasingly more diminished. They get shorter and shorter and shorter as the poem goes on until the very end, when it's just 2 words at the end. And in English, I have 3 words, but it's also very short. Just a few more. Just looking at the time. So this one, I feel, even though it was written in 2015, it does feel like, it feels like it's a poem for this moment. And you'll see why. Elegy, right? It feels like it's in our pandemic moment. It just, yeah.
It's very autobiographical at the same time. And
interesting.
And again, what inspires it is something that, a gesture that when I was a child was very common, was eating a raw egg, which today is something absolutely forbidden.
Right. Well, didn't Rocky do it in the movies? Didn't he eat all these raw eggs before he went running in training? I think so, in the movie Rocky. Yeah.
I don't know. This is something that comes from my grandmother.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah, and today it's so dangerous. It's considered so dangerous. But I mean, my brothers and I used to eat raw eggs, and never happened anything to us. Elegia. Temps enrere, abans que se separessin els continents i comencéssim a comptar en anys les nostres vides, encara era possible agafar una agulla de cap, picar un foradet en la closca porosa i xuclar amb delit el groc embrionari del rovell barrejat amb la llum mullada de la clara. Un viatge per túnels secrets desplaçava matèria i aliment d'una concavitat a una altra, de la foscor lliscadissa dels inicis a la foscor definitiva de la gola. D'això fa molt de temps, quan les gallines ponien ous a l'ombra improvisada de 4 taulons, quan els gossos rosegaven carcanades i sobralles dominicals i semblaven feliços, quan els bacteris no havien colonitzat tots els meridians de la por. Els microscopis dormien i nosaltres menjàvem en pau els fruits senzills de la terra.
Elegy. Long ago, before the continents were divided, and we began counting our lives in years, it was still possible to pick up a pin, prick a hole in the porous shell, and joyfully suck the embryonic yellow of the yolk mixed with the egg white's moist light. A journey through secret tunnels displaced matter and food from one concavity to another, from the slippery darkness of beginnings to the definitive darkness of the throat. That was a long time ago, when hens laid eggs in the improvised shadow of 4 planks, when dogs gnawed on carcasses and Sunday leftovers and seemed happy, when bacteria hadn't colonized all the meridians of fear. Microscopes slept, and we ate in peace the simple fruit of the earth. I'm thinking you just change when bacteria to when viruses hadn't colonized all the meridians of fear, and you have our moment.
Yeah.
So we're going to close with a few poems from Gemma's last book, Viatge al Centre, Voyage to the Center, which just came out last year, 2020. And it's a very minimalist collection. I love it for its understatedness. It really, I think, puts front and center this idea that poems are not just the words that are there, but they also gesture at the silences, to the white space, to the absences, to absence as another kind of presence. And so here are 2 poems. I would read all of them to you, but here I'm just going to give you a sample, and I'm going to read this first poem, Hospitality of the Blank Page. Actually, Gemma's going to read it first.
L'hospitalitat de la pàgina en blanc. Perquè som massa criatures per tan poc amor. Poso la paraula al pany i convido àngels i mosques, déus i borinots, ortigues i orquídies a entrar-hi amb mi, a habitar democràticament aquesta nova casa de pulmons buits.
Hospitality of the blank page. Since there are too many of us creatures for so little love, I put the word in the lock and beckon angels and flies, gods and bumblebees, nettles and petals to come inside with me and occupy democratically this new home of empty lungs. Maybe we should read, let's read Radiance. Let's read that one as well, so you'll see how much it is about presence and absence. Let's, which is just the next page, Fulgo.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't know if I mentioned this to you, Sharon.
I don't know.
But this is the last poem that I wrote. I mean, the last of, it's not the last of the book, but it's the last that I wrote.
Oh, okay.
Fulgor. Com més escric, més invisible em torno. M'esborro amb meravellosa intensitat.
You see how short these poems are. It'll go by very quickly. Radiance. The more I write, the more invisible I become, erasing myself with stunning intensity. It's this disappearing act that's happening for you right on the page as you're reading. And we're going to close with the final poem in this collection. I'm forgetting, is that the final poem also in the book itself?
No.
Okay.
Actually, the last poem is one called Death.
Okay, there you have it. But this one feels like it could be the last poem.
Yeah.
The way it diminishes itself, as everyone will hear.
Decreixement. Aprendre dels crancs, l'art pacífic d'anar enrere. Aprendre a desaprendre, descalçar-se, desviar-se, sorprendre's i de nou sorprendre's. Mirar una poma fins a alliberar-la de la polsina de l'al·legoria. No saber res del que s'ha de saber. Oblidar la retòrica sintètica i la mecànica avorrida de l'àtom. Mirar sense dir estic mirant. Estimar sense dir estic estimant. Deixar els versos inacabats. Deixar els versos. Deixar.
Decreation. Learn from crabs the peaceful art of going backwards. Learn to unlearn, go shoeless, digress. Surprise yourself yet again. Look at an apple until you liberate it from the fine dust of allegory. Know nothing about what you should know. Forget artificial rhetoric and the boring mechanics of the atom. Look without saying, I am looking. Love without saying, I am loving. Leave verses unfinished. Leave verses. Leave. Thank you so much. We could go on reading, but I thought that instead we would take some questions if there are any. And so you could either write one into the chat, or do you know how to raise your hand in the reaction section? There's a raise hand function and I can actually call on you. Down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see reactions and then there's raise hand. If there are any questions anyone would like to ask. Let me see if there are any questions in the chat. I see a question about which poem did you find most difficult to translate? And I think it would have been in alphabetical order because I was really stymied on the last line of the poem because it was about putting words in alphabetical order and preserving that sense of you. I mean, I couldn't translate the poem and say thou. That wouldn't, it wouldn't be the proper register. And so I really had to stick to the alphabet more than to the meanings of the words in order to follow the progression in alphabetical order. So I changed the meaning almost entirely, and again, added that homophone of you, Y-O-U, and Y-E-W that's not there in the original. But I think I preserved something of this kind of fascination with the delight of finding what are the words that somehow by coincidence are near each other in the dictionary, and they somehow are brought into relationship with each other. Very similar to the way rhyme is, I think, where you have words that sound alike and they're also brought into relationship. I think that's why I felt I could do the you, the homophone. How much Catalan did you have to learn in order to write these translations? I had to learn the language. And I am far from being fluent in it. And what I've discovered in translation is that the most important thing is being fluent in your target language, meaning I'm pretty fluent in English. That ends up being more important than Catalan. Somebody could correct my Catalan, but it's having the ear and the sense of the English language and being able to create a poem that's going to work in English. That's the most important thing. So even if you're not fluent in a language, I think you should feel free to go ahead and translate. I call this a combination of love and chutzpah that got me to do the translation. And you can have somebody who's a native speaker check your work. I see that there is a question from Anne Kaiser.
Hi, Sharon. Thanks.
Hi.
Hi. Well, congratulations on a wonderful book. Gemma, we haven't met, but your poetry precedes you. So I'm just so happy. Sharon, congratulations on the translation. I was wondering, as I'm actually working on a selected works of Anagual, how you decided on which poems to include. Gemma, you have so many books, so many poems. How did you work on that together? Thanks.
Thank you for the question. We didn't really work on that together. I think it was just my sense of which poems I liked, which poems I thought went into English well enough, and wanting to achieve a balance of poems that are about vision, poems that are about language, poems that actually in her penultimate book, there are several poems that are about the death of her grandmothers. And so there are autobiographical poems as well. I didn't read any of those. They were really I think it was really up to me to make that decision. I hope I chose well.
Well, it seems so. Thanks. Thanks for that. Yeah.
Sure.
Actually, I felt that I didn't have to interfere with that selection. I think that it was your work to select. Of course, I have my favorite poems, but it was totally up to you to choose the ones. I think this is related to what you explained before, as feeling comfortable in English. So maybe my favorite poems in Catalan are not as well rendered in English. So you choose whatever poems you think that are going to work, to sound, to live better in English.
Right. I hope I didn't leave anything out that you wish I'd included. It's too late now. Let's see. Are there other questions? Yes, Sarah.
Thank you. Beautiful reading. I love the way, hi Gemma, I love the way Gemma's poems weave the sensual with the metaphysical. And I wonder if that was hard as a translator to capture that, because I think you did it really well. It's just beautiful.
Thank you. No, I think that is just part of what one has to do when one translates. In the same way that I think there's often this mixture of vision and the visionary. I didn't really read one of those poems that specifically deals with that. And that comes up a lot in Book of Minutes, the previous book of prose poems that I translated. I just think I was sensitive to the fact that you have this physicality, the alveoli, like the alveoli of the soul and the soul, right? That you have the physicality, and then you have the transcendence of the physicality. I think that's just part and parcel of what I had to do. And I think English is certainly a flexible enough language that we have the literal and the figurative. And I think that came pretty easily, I think. Let's just see if there's maybe one more question. This is a question for Gemma. Did the translations affect any of the poems in the original? Did they make you reconsider or think differently about the original?
Yes, I mean, every time that I visit again one of my poems, I see them from a different light. So imagine when I hear them in a different language, it's as if they were not mine. It's a it's a sense of otherness. I mean, these poems were written by someone else. I don't know. But this also happens to me when I read in Catalan poems that I've written 20 years ago. Was it me, really?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How could I write these poems? So this feeling increases when I hear them in English. This sense of strangeness.
Great. Well, I think that's a good way to end. And so I think I'm going to say thank you all, and I'm going to I'm going to say over to Sarah again. Give me 1 second here. Give me 1 second. Okay. Sarah, let's see if you start speaking. If now the
Hi, does everyone? Yes, I think I'm back. I just want to say thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Gemma. This was so wonderful. I'm so happy that so many people are able to gather over Zoom and hear those words. It felt very intimate. It felt very wonderful. I hope all of you have already, probably all of you have already purchased the book. I put a couple of links in the chat, or you can find it on the Saturnalia Books website or your local bookstore. It's a book that I go back to again and again. I mean, these poems are so wonderful and sensual and beautiful. I'm so happy that I was just even a tiny part in bringing it into the world. So thank you all. And again, thank you, Gemma. Thank you, Sharon.
okay.